now been 20 years since September 11th and the tragic terrorist attacks. And we've been discussing evolution of global risks and what they're like back then versus today, 20 years out. But first, I want to get a little bit of background from you as to where you were before this role, because I think it really gives us some perspective as to why we're going to talk to you about this evolution of terrorism and cyber threats.
Sean, thanks for the question. And 9/11 is a very somber day for the nation and for those of us that have been first responders and in the fight for terrorism since that event. And thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit about my background. But it's always been a team fight against this global war on terrorism. And I'll start from the beginning. So almost 30 years ago, I left Iowa and ended up being a Houston police officer. At the age of 22, I was the youngest patrol officer in Houston. I was fortunate enough after that to end up in Denver, Colorado, as a U.S. Postal Inspector as a federal agent. After 9/11, the FBI had expanded their hiring. They were looking for law enforcement officers and SWAT tactical officers, and I was hired under that program. I became a counterterrorism agent in the FBI. I worked in Iraq out of Balad. I worked in Nairobi in Somalia in the fight against East African Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab, and worked up to some policy and strategy positions at the White House. And worked for the Director of National Intelligence. I was one of the first national intelligence managers for threat finance. You're probably very familiar with that position. And then evolved into the head of intelligence for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the largest U.S. law enforcement organization. And then after President Trump was elected, I was asked by General Kelly and the president to be the head of intelligence for Department of Homeland Security and the head of intelligence for the whole United States, crafting the threat picture for the U.S. for crime, cyber, as you mentioned, foreign intelligence services, as well as terrorism. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve the country, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks. It really is. It's an extraordinary experience. I was also able to serve in government roles, in particular in the Bush administration, Treasury Department, and OMB. And OMB, we were very much focused and engaged on the global war and terrorism in terms of financing. And it actually, led to me going in then to the insurance industry, which I really didn't expect to do. But one thing that for sure that brought me into the industry was when I was talking to my former employer, Zurich Insurance. They walked me through how the industry was going to very much get through the financial crisis that was beginning in 2008. And because of our safe investments and the way that we protect capital as a financial tool, as a financial first responder, so that we can be there and pay those claims. And I think that's really what we saw happen in 9/11 in the insurance industry as well. Interestingly enough, Dave, I'd be interested in kind of your anecdote as you were serving, I think, in government roles as to where you were at 9/11 at the time.
Yeah, I was in Denver, Colorado as a police officer at the time when 9/11 happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. My parents were in town visiting me. I had just gotten our first home in Denver. And I remember watching the footage of the aircraft live striking the second tower. And at that time, we all knew that this was not an accident. This was an act of terrorism. And we were a whole new environment as a country at that time. And the world had changed. We had changed, and we will forever be changed after that day. It was our Pearl Harbor event for our generation, without question. And it's amazing how we rose to the occasion to defend ourselves and recover from such a horrific attack.
Yeah, indeed. Interestingly enough, I happened to be in Denver as well at 9/11. I grew up in Colorado and was visiting my parents at the time. I was in my parents' home. So both of us were in Denver and with our parents during this tragic time, and which I know took an impact on all of us. And the industry really was there, though, at the time in terms of its response. At the time when a terrorist event was considered a risk, it wasn't considered a risk in any way as large as what we saw in the magnitude of 9/11. And the total insured losses of 9/11 were actually $47 billion in today's numbers. At that time as well, though, policies were more vague. They didn't directly address the terrorism, and the industry did the right thing in that regard. It stepped up and it covered the claims, but it also understood that it couldn't do that again. It couldn't withstand itself from a solvency standpoint. And what actually happened, and this really is a little bit of a testament to the power that insurance brings to economic growth and stability. Once especially the commercial insurance industry knew that it wasn't going to be able to cover terrorism, you literally saw big metropolitan areas like New York in particular, Chicago, though, other Washington, D.C., where they weren't able to cover real estate or construction type of insurance policies. And those industries nearly shut down. And it did take a government to come in, a federal legislation, the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, that allowed there then to be a backstop. And that's, in fact, kind of where the industry had gone from paying a lot of claims, but also understanding that this risk was more out of control than they had planned. And so it does take it sometimes for a government backstop to come in for such extraordinary claims issues, even like we've just seen with the COVID-19 and a pandemic.